Hello and welcome, everyone. It is with absolute pleasure that I welcome Sheela Reddy and Moni Mohsin for a conversation about Mr. and Mrs. Jinnah. An introduction first, and let me just pull up. All right. Sheela Reddy has written extensively for leading Indian newspapers and journals during her 35 years in journalism. She is a former books editor of Outlook, and her writing has appeared in literary magazines and in several anthologies, and an edited volume of essays by Khushwant Singh titled Why I Supported the Emergency. Mr. and Mrs. Jinnah is her first book. Welcome, Sheila. Moni Mohsin was born and raised in Lahore, Pakistan. She started her writing career at the Friday Times, Pakistan's first independent weekly, where she served as features editor. She is now a freelance journalist and author of three novels: the prize winning The End of Innocence, Tenderhooks, and The Impeccable Integrity of Ruby R. Her best selling collection of satirical columns, The Diary of a Social Butterfly and The Return of the Butterfly, are based on her long running column for the Friday Times. So, welcome, Moni.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and such an honor to be speaking with Sheila about a subject that has long fascinated me.
It's over to you, Moni. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Sheila, first of all, thank you so much for writing this book. It has been such an education for me to read it and so interesting. I found out so much. So, the book is called. Why don't I ask you first to tell us what the book is about and how you came to write it?
My daughter told me it's mandatory in Zoom meetings to hold up your book, so I've got it out here ready to show it to you. And the book is called Mr. and Mrs. Jinnah, and it's basically, I thought it was a way of approaching life through a biography of a marriage. So I basically wanted to write about the marriage because it was such a fascinating instance of how politics affects individual life and how the individual lives go on to change politics. So this was a kind of a perfect example of it. So I guess that's what I was trying to do in the book. I don't know how to explain it any better. It is I guess on a personal level, it is a biography of a marriage between two very ill-matched people who are very much in love, but the love is not enough to save them from the kind of world they live in.
Mm. It it was a as you said, it was they were both ill-matched. It was a mismatch actually right from the start. But before we go on to discuss the book, can you tell me why you wrote it? When did you think of it? How long did it take you to write it? And what were the obstacles along the way?
That's three questions in one. Uh, why I wrote the book? I guess uh, Jinnah has always been a larger than life character in all our lives on both sides of the border, and I wanted to get closer to him to find out more about what went on inside him because he was such a cipher and it was so difficult to really fathom what was going on. He was such a bundle of seeming contradictions because he's portrayed mostly as grown up uh, with the stereotype of him as this very obstinate, hard to persuade man who was basically somehow the single villain that brought about the partition and that kind of narrative. And but I came to him. I was surprised that he did so many things that didn't gel with this image, like going and marrying somebody who was 24 years his junior, a marriage which would have been political suicide for any, anyone who was who valued his political career as much as Jinnah did. And yeah, and a, a human being who was very loyal to his friends and mm, played by the book, didn't break the rules, a liberal, obviously for marrying out of his community. And it was a reason to want to know more about this man, what made him tick. And just so happened that I love digging around in the archives. I used to love digging around in the archives when I was working for a newspaper because it served two purposes. One is I could get a story for my magazine. I used to work for a magazine called Outlook. And the other thing was it was just something I loved to do. I love going through old letters and so on. And I came across, this I must tell you that I started getting interested in Jinnah when Jaswant Singh wrote his book, and it became this huge thing. And Jaswant Singh was the first book in which we were actually reading about the personal aspects of Jinnah. And there were many hints there that this was a very unusual man. And I went into the libraries and wherever I could find to find more about his marriage because it interested me. What was this man doing marrying somebody so much younger than him and from another community? But I found nothing except a couple of books landed on my desk because I was the books editor there. And these were from Pakistan. And they were basically like compilations of all the source material on Rati Jinnah, that was Jinnah's wife. And it didn't tell you much. It was like a teaser, you know. It would say that they loved each other very much, but they separated. And you never knew what happened. Why did they separate? Or it would say that he was a very liberal man, but something else. You know, there would be all these contradictions which weren't explained. And so I gave up. I thought I could write a book because it interested me so much. And being a journalist, I don't like to read anything without making a book out of it, you know, or an article out of it. I wanted to get something out of it. So I started looking around to see if it was possible. And I was wondering why nobody had ever written about it. And I found out that there was really no go because there was just not enough information available. There was just nothing available to make this into anything except a second-rate soap opera kind of thing. It just didn't have the facts around it.
Yeah.
Or if they were there, they were not available to any historian so far. Then, as my luck would have it, I went into the archives one day looking for something else. Padmata Naidu's correspondence with Nehru, because I suspected there was a romance there and I wanted something on that. And while she had this huge collection of papers that she had donated to the Nehru Library. And in that was this section. I mean, they had a whole book just to catalog the papers that were available, the files that were available. And one of the files that were available was her correspondence with R. Jinnah. And I asked the librarian, what is this? So she said, that's Rati Jinnah. So I said, oh, can I look at this? And she brought it over. And to my amazement, there were 100 sheets of letters between Rati Jinnah and Padmaja Naidu, dating from the time both these girls were 15 till the year that Rati Jinnah died in 1929. So the whole span of her girlhood and her marriage was covered in that correspondence. And they were very close friends. So there was a lot of letters and much being said.
And you use that extensively in your book because you quote from the letters over
Yes.
and over again.
Yeah, but the thing was that when I found the books very early on, and I thought, oh, this is it. I found my treasure, and I just had to sit down and write my book. But from the moment of finding those letters to actually connecting the dots took maybe another 5, 6 years.
Of course, I can imagine. I can imagine. It must have been very difficult. And then also, as you do, to piece together what was happening in Jinnah's life politically at the same time, and
Yes,
trying to understand the marriage in the context of the political career as well as it was unfolding, and also how Rati's needs and demands were always secondary to, it seems to me, in Jinnah's life to his political calling.
yeah.
So that's very interesting the way you put them side by side and juxtapose them.
Actually, now when you're talking, I'm suddenly remembering that was not my original aim. My original aim was just to write about the marriage because I wasn't interested in politics at all. But the thing is that when I went looking, I couldn't find anything from Jinnah. I mean, there were a few letters, but these letters were letters written officially, and they were so elliptical. You didn't get anything out of it. He just doesn't give you anything about himself in any letter he writes. So I had to go looking for his political diary because almost every day during the height of his career he was giving a speech a day somewhere or the other. So I needed to go to his politics in order to make sense of the marriage.
I understand. I would like to rewind a little bit and go back now to the book and how they both come across. And also, I want to start actually by first talking about Jinnah and Rati as people. You said that you started your conversation by saying that Jinnah is a character who looms large in the Indian imagination, but more as a villain than anything else. And therefore, the nuances in his character have been bleached out because he is a villain. In Pakistan, the exact opposite has happened. He is now a man in a karakuli topi and an achkan, and he is no longer the Jinnah that comes across in your book, wearing the Savile Row suits and those high collars, etc. And also a man who married Rati, a woman of another faith who's 24 years younger than him. We don't know at all what Jinnah thought, what Jinnah ate, who Jinnah's friends were, how Jinnah spent his time, what his marriage was like. So for all those reasons, he's just shown as a national hero. And you can't investigate him. To investigate him is almost tantamount to treason now, because he's the guy on our currency, on our notes, and he's the guy whose picture is in every government office, and beyond that he does not exist. So this was very interesting for me, and Rati in particular only appears as a shadow. She has also been erased from Pakistani records because she doesn't fit. It's Fatma Jinnah, the devoted sister, wearing the gharara, who's always, and with her head covered, who's always beside Jinnah. And later on, when Fatma Jinnah actually challenges the military dictator Ayub Khan, at that time she's reviled, and then it becomes, then she's removed also from our historical record. Up until then, she's the mother of the nation, but once she challenges Ayub Khan, she's no longer the mother. But anyway, so that for all those reasons, this was very interesting for me. The most difficult thing for me to get my head around, there were two things. One was the age difference. And when the book starts, Rati is 15 years old. She is a schoolgirl, right? I mean, and I know that, history standards are different across different historical times, and what passes for acceptability is also different. Now, when you think about this, he's almost, he's in his late 30s, if he's not 40 at that time. He is, this is a 15-year-old girl. This is pedophilia in this part of the world, in Britain at the moment. If somebody a political leader was to marry a 15-year-old girl now, it would be very, very different. You would look upon it with great distaste. What was Jinnah thinking when he decided to marry her? Because although you say in the book that he was entranced by her and that she could bring him out of his kind of stony, disciplined persona, and she could tease him and she could cajole him and she could sometimes make fun of him also in a way that nobody else could. What you don't really say why he chose to marry her, because I suppose you do not actually, as you admit yourself, have access to his thinking because he puts so little down on paper. But what do you think was he thinking in doing this?
Yeah, Moni, first of all, I want to say that you have to judge each historical era in its own context. You can't put the standards of now against that. Remember that 12 was the age of consent for marriage in the undivided India at that time.
Yeah.
And this is after it was revised. 12 was regarded as a fair enough thing. And liberal people were looking at 16 as a person is an adult and she can take. In fact, Jinnah defended his position in the parliament of that time, the legislature of that time, by saying that, anyone over 16, she's able to take her
Own decision.
Own decision. The other thing is, remember a generation before her, Sarojini Naidu, who's Jinnah's age, fell in love at 14. She got married at 19 only because her father was very much against the marriage and had her sent off to England, and then she went there and, she stuck to her guns and therefore she could come back and get married. But at the time, you're saying Rati was a schoolgirl. She was surprised that Padmaja was still in school because by 15 and a half, they were out of the schoolroom, and they were part of their mother's drawing room set. They were going to all the parties. The social life was the same for the mothers and for the daughters. And the only business of their life then was to find life partners. There was nothing more for women to do. Their lives were not, they didn't have that many choices. And the thing was that at the same age, there was Nehru's sister also falling in love with what's his name, Hussein. Saeed Hussain. She was falling in love, and she also had a marriage. Nobody called that pedophile. Huh?
No,
Uh,
only because he
Only because he's much older, you're saying. Now, the thing is that she had plenty of people running after her, a lot of princes, and then, people her age, that kind of thing. She was a person who liked older people. She always socialized. Her best friend was Sarojini Naidu, who's the same age as Jinnah.
Mm.
She, she she used to attend all Jinnah's, wherever he gave a public speech,
Mm.
because she was so ardent about his political thing. And then remember, at that time, uh, there was a kind of immense glamour about him.
Mm.
Even people who later became his enemies, uh, like Chagla,
Mm.
said that he was the uncrowned king of Bombay at that time.
Mm.
The young people would flock to his chambers just to have a chat with him. He
Mm.
was hero worshipped by all the young people,
Mm. Mm.
mostly men, because the women were not so free to go and meet him. But Rati was lucky or unlucky because she came from a family which had no parda.
Mm.
So they entertained people, and Jinnah could be a fascinating talker when he talked about politics, which was also Rati's interest. Huh?
Mm.
So,
Yeah, he was
and
looking, and he was well dressed, and he was wealthy, and he had.
he was not just well dressed, but the legal in the legal fraternity, he was called the Bo Brahmal,
Mhm.
because people would go to court just to hear him talk because he was such a sensation. Uh,
Mm.
he was like a film star in Bombay.
Basically, for her, it was like a teenage crush. Yeah, and as happens so often in the subcontinent, it used to happen to even friends of mine that if a girl was involved with a man or she was keen on a man, she couldn't just date him. She had either to break up or she had to marry him. This is to happen to a lot of my friends. So they
Yes,
ended up marrying people that they fancied at the age of 15, but had
yes,
nothing in common with by the time they got to their 30s.
that's right. That's right. And I think for Rati it was doubly unfortunate because the war broke out.
Hmm.
She couldn't get out of that little circuit. They were constantly bumping into each other because the circle of elite was so small.
Hmm.
Whereas if there was no war, the family would have traveled to London and Paris and so on,
Hmm.
and she would have had more chance of meeting other people.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Tell me, why do you think Jinnah married her?
I think Jinnah was very stiff and cold with most women.
Hmm.
He was not very comfortable being with women.
Yeah.
He was much more at ease with young men.
Hmm.
uh, and he was only comfortable talking about politics, and he didn't like, and he was very, in a very Victorian fashion, he was very courteous. He could give you a very stiff compliment about a Lady Petit's dress or something like that, which would
Okay.
charm the older woman. It's a kind of old word courtesy kind of thing. But he really he had never really, as far as you could tell, have had anything to do with a woman since he came back from England. Even in England, there's a story that Fatima Jinnah tells in her biography of her brother, where the landlady's daughter tried to kiss him, and this was standard, right? All the landladies' daughters were setting caps at these Indian men. And when she tried to kiss him, she put some, what do you call it? That thing,
Mistletoe.
mistletoe. She put a mistletoe and tried to kiss him there, and he gave her such a crushing put down.
Hmm.
saying, we don't do these things where I come from, kind of
You think he was
thing.
gay?
Huh?
You think he was gay?
I can't say it on live. Uh, let's just say it was very I don't think again that's putting a kind of
Yes.
uh,
I think
a
actually
spin
what
on.
I think it was that he left for England when he was very young.
Yes.
He, he didn't have a family life after that so much, because
No. Uh,
he came back. The person, his mother had passed away, to whom he was very close, and
yes.
his sisters were already married, and he, as
Just
you
one married.
sorry,
These sisters, he got them married after he came back.
wasn't one of them married already, the elder one?
No, he got both of them married after he came back.
Okay, okay. And then Fatma Jena never married, and he took charge of her schooling, and he was a very, very loving, perhaps not loving in that sense, but a very attentive brother to her.
Yes, yes.
But
Uh,
he was the thing about him, which I found interesting, was that he developed, as you say, this persona of iron discipline and of enormous self possession very early on in his life. And
yes,
he was, as you say, absolutely obsessed with politics. And
yes,
that became his whole life. And
yes,
when you talk about friendships, also, even though you talk about the fact that he had a lot of people coming to talk to him and listen to him, he doesn't seem to have had a kind of home in which people could just drop in and chat in his chambers, yes, to talk politics, but
yes,
not to have a meal with him and chill and relax and chat and his friends bringing their families over, like happens in the subcontinent, or even then happened because he was
yes,
part of a liberal elite as well. I mean,
yes,
not everybody's wife was in Parda. Sarojini Naidu was a friend of his,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
but it seems to me like he had absolutely no close
Love interest
personal
at
friends,
all.
or
No.
personal friends even, you
Huh?
know.
He,
Or
he had two very close chums. One was the editor of Bombay
Horniman,
Chronicle, huh?
Horniman, Horniman.
Hon- Horniman, and the other was Feroz Shah Mehta. And these three were called the gay bachelors, not gay in any
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
other sense. Huh? But and they would go for holidays together, and they had a great time together and that kind of thing. But he was not really comfortable with women. But then Rati's father, who was this great litigant and kind of gold mine for any upcoming lawyer, uh, wanted Jinnah to come to come and visit them when he was on a summer holiday,
Yes,
possibly in Pune or whatever. And
housekeeping.
that is when he got really close, I suspect, to Rati, because after that I noticed a couple of her poems where she's talking about him going away and forgetting her. So I suspect, uh, as some of his friends have actually said, uh, that she chased him.
Yeah, must have been. Must have been. I think he was
Yeah.
shy with women.
Uh, he
I
was
think.
very shy with women. The story is that she made her way to the Lucknow Congress session where Jinnah was the hero of it, right? It was a joint session of the Muslim League and the Congress. And he brought them together for the first time on the same platform.
Hmm.
And he was the hero of that session, and she made her way there with her aunt. And the story goes that she proposed marriage to him,
Yeah.
and he said it's not a bad idea.
Yes. Yes.
But the thing is that the father objected,
Yes.
and Jinnah, being Jinnah, would have withdrawn offended because his pride is always greater than anything. But I suspect she chased him after that.
Yes, I think so too. But the thing that I found strange was that he still felt that this might be a good thing, for him, or that he could manage it, because the father left him in no doubt about what the reaction of the Parsi society was going to be. She was going to be excommunicated virtually.
No, no, no. Nobody suspected she was going to be excommunicated. Many of the top-notch Parsis had married out of the country even, and they'd managed to get it. But he was facing some pressure, and he tried, and people were telling him that you better stop this. And so he did a very foolish thing by putting that court order against him, saying that he fears that Jinnah is going to abduct her because of her fortune, which is a ridiculous thing to say to Jinnah, who had a huge fortune of his own, which was self-made, and he didn't need Rati's money, and he was always very proud to point out later too that he didn't take a penny from her father.
Mm.
But
And in fact, he bankrolled what seems to have been an extraordinarily extravagant lifestyle that Rati had.
from her point of view, she was economizing. Remember where she came from. She lived in a castle. They went out for a carriage ride and bought 5, 6 Persian carpets at one go. She had accounts at all the major stores where she just had to sign, and anything she wanted would come home. She was not used to. She had never dealt with actual money. It was just she just writes it.
The French maids and the English governesses. I mean, the lifestyle just seems to be extraordinary, immense wealth. Traveling with even to Europe with a staff, having animals and people to look after your animals that travel with you. So if you have a pet cat, you have somebody who looks after your pet cat who travels with you.
Yes.
And when she arrives anywhere, she comes with her French maid who does her hair and dresses her. I mean, those kind of things are just extraordinary to my mind.
Yes.
And social
But
work.
but Moni, remember that all the lawyers of that time, including Nehru's father, Motilal Nehru, I mean, the myth about Motilal Nehru was he sent his socks to Paris to be dry cleaned.
Yes.
I don't know why he would do that, because you can buy new socks for that price rather than send them for dry cleaning. But anyway, that was the myth. And the thing is that I think that was not an issue in their marriage at all. I don't think money was an issue at all, because somewhere, remember, even after Rati died, when Jinnah was building uh, his mansion, he never objected to how much money was put into it. He he was not, he was a very austere man himself personally, but he liked to project this idea that money didn't count with him. It was very important for him. So a wife like this is not a pain in the side, but actually a status symbol for him. That,
Yeah, she was
you
a
know,
trophy wife. She was a trophy wife. But
yeah,
anyways, what I found very interesting was that he was endlessly indulgent and also very proud of her. So that when she went to places with him, he liked her sitting on the dais with him. He liked her being present at the dinners that he attended at the Viceroy's house. He never checked her when she spoke to the Viceroy, or she snubbed the Viceroy in a manner which he was not necessarily useful for his career. He never stopped her from meeting people. She upped and went off to Europe for 9 months. And though he was upset about that, he never reproached her.
yes,
Uh, and so all of those things were I think, very commendable about him. Very,
yes,
very commendable.
yes.
But I don't know whether he looked upon all of this as his duty as a husband, or whether he did it because he truly loved her and there was nothing that he could refuse her. Because you get so little, even in your book where you've worked so hard on this, you get so little from about what he actually thinks. Like you said, that he reads this book in which it says that if you decide to take your wife back, you must not reproach her. And he underlines that 3 times. And when she comes back from England, having just left and gone, when she comes back, he's fine with her. He doesn't never mentions anything, never asks her, who did you see and what did you do? Um, is that because he truly loves her, or because he feels, I have married this woman, she's younger than me, it's now my duty to just put up?
There's definitely not younger than me, because the younger than me never counted in that marriage. As their closest friend Kanji Dwarkadas says, uh, in the relationship, she was the mother to him. He leaned on her, and he was completely dependent on her for all his comforts, and he couldn't do without her. She was the mother figure in the thing. But about what you're saying, did he love her? Undoubtedly, because she left. Each time she left and went away, he put aside his pride and tried to get her back. And even in that last year, when they were separated, he never lost the hope that he could persuade her to come back. Each time he was in Bombay, he would spend every evening at her house or hotel room. I can't tell where she was living. And she would be the most important person in his life. And he didn't ask Fatima to come back and keep house for him till she actually died.
Yes, I know. Because she didn't like Fatima, and he understood that.
Yeah, but even when they were separated, he still had hope that he could persuade her back.
But Sheela, at the same time, you say in your book that, when he used to come back from work, she would prepare all this wonderful dinner and all that, and he was not interested in food. He ate very little, and he liked bland food. And then he would withdraw to his library, leaving her alone and unaccompanied. And all evening she sat by herself. And also you say that he hardly ever took her on holiday and spent time with her. Politics always came first with him. So that even when they had planned a holiday, if something were to happen, he would ditch her and go off. He never took her to Europe. And, when he takes her to England, it's days after they go to a theater. He never remembers her birthday. He never calls her on her birthday. He never asks her he never gives her gifts. She can go and shop and
granted, but that's the way he was. I think he's just an emotionally unavailable man. She just chose the wrong man. He was not the man for her. He would have been fine for somebody who had social ambitions of her own. Like I describe another marriage where, she immediately started a parallel life. I'm forgetting who. There was another couple in Lahore. Same, she was Muslim and he was Hindu. I described 3 marriages there, right? So that lady immediately started a kind of, she started becoming a socialite.
Yes.
And she'd spend her time decorating a house so that it would be, it would be the kind of house she wanted. And she got her satisfaction by becoming the social bigwig of Lahore. But those were not Rati's ambitions.
What were Rati's ambitions? Because she seems to be a complete...
God knows, she's a very confused young woman.
Lost.
Yes. The thing is also, I feel it was the era where where people were just, she was reading all these uh, new authors who were coming up in the uh,
Literary world.
yeah. I mean, at the end of the Victorian age, when the Edwardian age started, there was this absolute flush of new literature that was coming out, where they were questioning the all the old values.
And
Huh?
particularly after the war,
Yes, yes,
war in the 20s, everything changed.
yes, yeah. This was the unfortunate thing because the war restricted her from having a larger social circle so that she could get to know him better. And after the war, everything changed forever. And then he became the old fogey and she was part of a new generation. And there was never such a big generation gap as after the war.
Yeah.
Huh?
And also, I think she never found, although she was interested in politics, it did not, she was interested in public speaking. She was excited by ferment. She was excited by big movements, etc. She never found something that could absorb her. I was also
No,
interested to see that she didn't have any friends, because I would have thought, apart from Sarojini Naidu and her family, she doesn't have friends from her circle who are not Parsi, for example, who would still have accepted her. She doesn't have any friends of her own age apart from Padmaja. She does
no.
not have any desire to, she does up her house very beautifully. She dresses up in wonderful style. But none of that seems to give her pleasure in the way that it is a sort of a sustaining thing for her.
Right.
We're going to end very soon. I just wanted to ask you two quick questions. One, about her daughter. That really upset me, Dina, who doesn't have a name until she's 4 years old or 5 years old. Who gave her the name? Who looked after her? And secondly, can we quickly talk about her mental illness and what it was you think that was killing her?
Uh, about the name, uh, she took her grandmother's name, right? And I have reason to believe, I may as well say it now because uh, I got into a phone conversation with Dina, but she was not willing to talk to me, so I had to put the phone on speaker and have a friend speak to her and ask my questions so that I could get. And in that conversation, which I couldn't put on record, uh, she did say that she loved her grandmother very much, and her grandmother loved her back, and that seems to be the one strong thing in her life. This grandmother, Lady Pettit, yes, uh, and uh, uh, and Dina is Lady Pettit's name. Uh, so, and who brought her up? At that time, it was quite common for children of the rich, of the very rich, to be brought up like the English Memsahibs were doing by proxy, by having hired people to do it. Except I feel that Rati was in a was uh, in a mental state where she was not, she was angry with her child or wanted to distance from her child. I don't know what it was, but it's interesting that after the book was written, when I went to Hyderabad, I found out through some other memoir that is not published about a woman who met her at that time in Hyderabad when she went on a visit very soon after her daughter was born. And what Rati was looking for at that time was some kind of a contraceptive pill which were not available. So she wanted at any cost not to have children.
Mm.
And at that time there were nothing available. So you ended up having 8, 10, 12. That became a full-time thing for women.
And what do you think about her mental illness? Can you quickly talk about that? Uh,
Yeah, I feel that the isolation, the complete isolation and loneliness that she was subjected to, uh, had a very deep impact on her mental health.
it
Uh,
damaged, yeah,
uh,
damaged her.
I think she went into a kind of depression,
Mm.
which was, and the addictions to the sleeping pills and whatever, those are all like uh, part of what was happening to her, you know, that it was because of the extreme loneliness and isolation of her life.
And it was undiagnosed, and therefore nobody noticed. And Jinnah never noticed that she was ill.
No, no. Uh,
It's tragic. What happened to her is utterly, utterly tragic.
yes,
I think we are running out of time, but thank you so much. I so enjoyed this. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed your chat, and I remain deeply, deeply upset about Rati's short and painful life. You know, she was a person of such promise and a person of
yes,
such sort of vivacity and enthusiasm and beauty and charm. Um,
yes,
and that, you know, in many ways, her story is that of many young women in the subcontinent who are crushed by their marriages. Without, Jinnah loved her and didn't want to crush her, and never did, and never told her what to wear and what to say and what to do, and gave her freedom. But I think, as you say, because he was emotionally unavailable, she was never able to find that the kind of validation that she needed.
yes.
Mm.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Moni.
Thank you,
Yes,
Sheila. That was so wonderful. Thank you very much. And
thank
may I just say to anybody who's listening, please do read the book. It is fascinating. And it is fascinating also because it is full of social history as well, social and political history of the time. And also, there is this portrait of this very glamorous but doomed marriage. Thank you. Thank you very
thank
much.
you. That's very kind of you. Uh,
Thank you so much.